I told a guy one time, I was in an AA meeting. I said, yeah. He said, where is it? And I said, it's not a destination. And you guys are counting on me for something. So I said, yeah, because there's nothing going to do this in the last. You got that spirit to hear, huh?
Yes, I'm Natalia.
Natalia, you spoke to this one.
I did.
Letitia.
Great.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
So you're going to make me look good.
Good. Well, he gave me the idea that
I was talking to Marie.
I know, right?
I was trying to make it over the summer.
Yeah.
You're the one carrying the powers through. Yes, you are.
It's okay.
Yeah.
What is this part? The speaker clarification?
So how many kings were there?
I think that's the same. Don't take too long. Down here, there's another Q&A. So I think this is our Q&A.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Hopefully they'll
So,
we're asking.
yeah, so this is
I don't know. I'm not good with proper attire.
We need more like you.
I got these at Nordstrom. stopped using another pair. They had so many pairs.
1953.
Because I couldn't find any anywhere that were like comfortable.
So they read as Michael, Mrs. Racism, America will be a great nation if you
So yeah, this is us.
Because we're going to respond.
He was right.
We're gonna respond to Dr.
He'd still be
2
right.
minutes each.
So like we can
I
ask
tell people all the
questions.
time. When he's
Can I take
It's good seeing you, Mike. Thanks for saying hi.
if I have one?
Knowing him, he's one of 16 children. He said I think there's like 6 left.
So how
And a bunch of them are firemen.
really? So what does he do?
He's retired.
Not able to see the pastor of the church?
He was Catholic his whole life, and then I think got divorced. Couldn't be Catholic anymore. Met someone that came here because it's close to Catholic. Yeah, they used to like deny you communion.
Where is this perfect world?
Maybe it wasn't just maybe it was the remarried thing. I don't know. Whatever.
I have to share that pen. Unless
I never understood these standards,
No one can do it all. I mean, you try. I agree. Yes, it's good to have roles, and yes, it's good for us to aspire to follow the rules. But you can't. It's just not perfect.
Because they say you can see in your thoughts.
It's like there's that plate of chocolate chip cookies. I'm only going to have one.
How you been?
I'm only going to have 2.
the box is gone.
For those of you just coming in, I told the last batch of people who just came in that the latecomer section is here up front, and they believed me, which is good because they have some of the best seats in the house. There are still some left, so come all the way up. Nobody will stare at you except in the friendliest way to see who you are, so that, oh yeah, maybe we can get together afterwards. So come all the way up. There are lots of seats up front. You'll be able to see better. For those of you who are seated in the back, Dr. Taylor is going to be using the slideshow screen with some information. If you don't find it easy to read, another good reason to come up to the front.
You know, it really is. And they live, we live up on Harvard. Right. They live on Orchard Place. About ready? So it's about a mile away. Oh, okay. Really
Is Reverend Denise coming?
Well, mine.
Stand the scale still working?
About ready? Yeah. I do not know her personally. Jillian, I know. I saw her yesterday. Sucks.
All right, now I'll say welcome in a formal sort of way. My name is Matt Lincoln. I'm the priest here at Trinity Church. It is a huge honor and joy, dare I say it, on a night like this, a privilege to welcome you to Trinity Church. This is a place that I love, and it's in a city that I love. I didn't know that I loved Buffalo until 7 years ago when I moved here and found out. And as much as I do love Buffalo, it's also heartbreaking. And so here we all are because of that. It's great to be together. This is the third evening of 3 in a series, and it's my hope that if you're here for the third time or the second time, you're sort of ready to take next steps. And if you're here for the first time, fasten your seatbelt because we've been on a ride. We're glad you're on the ride now. It's never too late. Here's the thing. All anti-racism work is anti-racism work. Every time you start is the time to start because that's when you can. So if you're here for the first time, it's great that you're here. And I think we'll have an especially rich evening. I'm going to let Cecile Mathis-Dorlier give a little synopsis of where we've been on this journey and start things properly. But I want to just invite you to take a moment to ask for the Holy Spirit's guidance as we do this together. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God of love, for all that we are made in your image and thus made for freedom, for all that we are made by your love and thus we are made to love our neighbors as ourselves, we depend on you for the strength, the wisdom, the courage to love deeply and broadly. Help us to remember always that justice is what love sounds like in public, and help us work together to make our society a place where truly all are invited to flourish and grow and be their full selves, valued for their full dignity by each and every one of their neighbors. We pray in the name of your gracious will, and in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome to the third and sadly final session in this three-part series on race, privilege, and power in Buffalo, New York, a faith perspective, in which is being hosted tonight at Trinity Episcopal Church. And we welcome all of you to what I am sure will be a fitting finale of the entire three-part series, which has been co-sponsored by Elam Christian Fellowship, St. Joseph University Church, Trinity Episcopal Church, and Voice Buffalo. Now, for me personally, it was an honor for me to be asked to moderate this event. It is the first time in my life that I ever spoke publicly and so candidly about the topic of racism, especially to a predominantly white audience. But it feels like part of the healing process that we all have to go through because we all need to heal. Perhaps instead of looking at it as if it's a sad end, maybe a more positive way to look at it is that it's a new beginning as we move forward together in this journey. For those of you who did not attend either the first or second session, again, my name is Cecile Mathis-Dorlier, and I will be your moderator. The program this evening is fuller than the two previous sessions, so I will not take up too much time on going over what transpired during the first two. I will just simply say that our four panelists, all hailing from good stock, shared and told their stories about how their personal and public lives have been impacted by the interaction of race, privilege, and power. The four panelists are Jerome Wright, Letitia Randall, Natalia Rice, and Hugh Russ. If any of you would like information on any of the sessions, you can contact any of us on this committee. And I believe session 2 at St. Joe's was recorded, and tonight's session will be live streamed as well as recorded. Tonight's program will be conducted a little differently because we are very fortunate to have as a featured speaker the Venerable Dr. Henry L. Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a noted director and I believe founder of the Center for Urban Studies at the University of Buffalo. And he has written extensively and spoken on the manner in which persistent, racialized, and structural policies and practices have negatively affected and continues to impact the Black community in Buffalo. He will discuss his writing and research on The Harder We Run, which will provide the context for the personal stories told by the panelists and the theme of this session, which is opportunities for action, troubling the waters, and will also include certain elements of his research, amplifying the fact that much needs to be cultivated in East Buffalo in an effort to advance its viability. Following Dr. Taylor's presentation, the four panelists will briefly reflect on how their personal stories relate to Dr. Taylor's discussion. Following Dr. Taylor's presentation, Reverend Matt Lincoln from Trinity Episcopal Church will assist in fielding questions from the audience to Dr. Taylor as well as the panelists. And we would ask that you hold your questions or comments to 1 or 2 minutes so that we can have fuller participation. And if you could state your name and affiliation before you speak. Then Reverend Denise Walden Green, Executive Director of Voice Buffalo, will speak about calls for action as to current and future opportunities and how you can get involved in the process. Next, Reverend Matt will speak to brainstorming action, moving forward, and then summarize the entire series. I was hoping to introduce Buffalo's own first poet laureate, Jillian Hainsworth. I understand she's having some difficulties with her throat and is under doctor's care, but I heard that she has submitted to us something that she has written and that I will read in her stead. Lastly, please mute or turn off your cell phones. Pay attention to the emergency exit, the exit you came in, and then there's an exit to my left. And the bathrooms are in the back to the right and downstairs for anybody that has to use the restroom. So pay attention to the emergency exits, and finally relax, listen, and learn. Ladies and gentlemen, I now introduce you to Buffalo's own Dr. Henry L. Taylor.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight to talk with you about the issues of race, privilege, and power. In the summer of 2021, Pastor George Nicholas of the Buffalo Center for Health Equity came to me and asked if I would be willing to do a study of the progress that African Americans had made since 1990. Pastor George knew that our center had conducted a major study on Black Buffalo in 1990. It was a study that looked at about 40, 50 years of movement of African Americans from 1940 to 1990. So from that investigation, we not only understood the conditions that blacks were facing in 1990, but we were able to understand the trends that were driving that development we were able to also understand the challenges and problems that they would be facing in the ensuing years. Tonight, I want to reflect on the harder we run, the state of Black Buffalo in 1990 and the present. My presentation will consist of 3 parts. In the first part, I want to answer that question: was progress made by Black Buffalo over this period of time? Second, I want to analyze Black life in Buffalo today. And in the final segment, we're going to talk about how Blacks can make progress in East Buffalo in the years to come. When we did our study of Black Buffalo back in 1990, we also outlined a clear vision of the type of new Black Buffalo that we wanted to build. And that vision was meant to be a reference point in the work that we did as we move forward. And I want to read to you what we said some 30 years ago. The goal is to transform the east side of Buffalo into a Renaissance city where the life chances of the poor and underclass are vastly improved, and where the middle class and higher paid workers are able to live in comfort and security. A lively place that attracts to its shops, restaurants, bars, and nightclubs visitors from across Buffalo City and the suburbs. While we might not be able to eliminate all the vestiges of poverty, we hope to change the meaning of what being poor means in the city of Buffalo. In the United States, being poor generally means living in dilapidated houses located in rundown, crime and drug-infested neighborhoods where inadequate schooling, housing, unemployment, and hopelessness are the norm. We plan to change that scenario. In new Black Buffalo, the poor will live in good houses located in neighborhoods filled with amenities and crime-free streets. They will walk hand in hand with the middle class and higher paid workers and build a better life for themselves and their families. Clearly, when we look at the critical indicators of progress, we did not achieve that goal. When we look at the issues of income and home ownership and employment and poverty, the needle has not moved in 30 years. The needle has not moved. And when we look at the conditions in our neighborhoods across the eastern side of Buffalo, those conditions have worsened over time. The powerful forces of systemic structural racism trapped Blacks, held them back, and kept them from advancing. And I'm talking about the decisions of public officials. I'm talking about the decisions of the private sector. And I'm talking about the choices that were made in the way we built the city of Buffalo. And when we take all those things into consideration, it seems that the harder we ran, the farther we fell behind. So that poses the question, why didn't black folks progress over this period of time? The start point is to understand the role of racial residential segregation in the systemic oppression and exploitation of African Americans. Now, when I talk about racial segregation in Buffalo, I always remind folks that while Buffalo is the 6th most segregated city in the United States, it wasn't always that way. In the industrial city, blacks and white immigrant workers lived in the same neighborhood. They shared residential space. Not only did they live in the same neighborhood and on the same streets, but often they even lived in the same boarding house as this place on Jefferson Avenue where Russian and Canadian immigrant workers lived in the same building with whites, with blacks. Now, I got to tell you, this wasn't about kumbaya. Tensions existed between the races, but they also formed friendships. The historian Lillian Williams even tells us that some black folks learned German so they could hang out and party with the German immigrant workers. And of course, we know blacks and Italians became friends. Some of them fell in love and raised families together. But it still was not about kumbaya. But the critical issue here is that in that moment in time, race was not etched into the living place. No one believed that blacks did not have a right to live in those white immigrant neighborhoods. No one said that blacks and white immigrant workers could not share residential space. All that changed during the Great Depression. It was the rise of mass home ownership that shattered the age of shared residential space. In the Depression years, the federal government, the real estate industry, the banking and finance industry decided that in order to get out of this depression and jumpstart the economy, they needed to make home ownership mass home ownership. They needed y'all to start having the dream that home ownership was the American dream. That got invented during that period of time. But they had a problem. In order to create mass home ownership, they needed to revolutionize the mortgage system. Back then, if you wanted to buy your own home, you'd have to put 40 to 50% down, pay off that loan in 2 to 5 years. So a lot of people, they just went out and built their own houses. You can see all over Buffalo examples of owner-built structures. So, to end this, to create mass home ownership, to engage the construction industry in the building of millions of new houses, they had to change the money mortgage system. And in order to do that, they'd have to look at a house like that and not only determine how much it was worth, what its value was, but they need to be able to talk about the future value. How much would that house be worth in 20 years? They needed to figure out how to do the history, the future history of a neighborhood. And the housing appraisal industry was in its infancy at that period. So they turned to a guy by the name of Frederick M. Babcock. And they asked him to develop this housing appraisal system. And Babcock developed a theory of neighborhood change. He said neighborhoods are born, they grow, they mature, and they decline, and eventually are transformed into a slum. That's like the death of a neighborhood. Then, drawing on the prevailing wisdom of that time, Babcock also said that the presence of a black person in a neighborhood triggered its rapid decline and transformation into a slum. He also said that immigrant workers and Jews were harmful to property values, but not nearly to the degree of the African American. The die was cast. Babcock's theory was simple, very simple. As the percentage of white increased in a neighborhood, along with social class exclusivity, values went up. As the percentage of blacks in a neighborhood increased and social class inclusivity grew, values went down. Understand what was going on. A system was being created in which white wealth was dependent on black poverty. You could not have one without the other. Now, once Babcock developed that system and attached class to it, race could disappear and it wouldn't matter, because blacks were concentrated in the low-income sections of the labor market. And then they tied housing values to neighborhood development. The whiter and more exclusive a community was, the greater the level of neighborhood development. The blacker and lower the value of housing, the more likely those places were underdeveloped. Development and underdevelopment were part of the same pole. The development of white neighborhoods automatically triggered the underdevelopment of black spaces. And so it was. Now let's take that theory and apply it to the development of Erie County. The mass home ownership explodes after World War II. And in this moment of time, thousands of whites leave Buffalo and move into the various suburban municipalities, because that was where the home ownership zone was. Understand, white folks were not fleeing the city. White flight is a Walt Disney fictive. Whites weren't fleeing, they were rushing to the suburbs, to the home ownership boom. Same as the great gold rush out to California. Nobody was fleeing black people, they were running toward home ownership. Meantime, thousands of African Americans moved into Buffalo City. This was the age of the second great migration, and due to the policies of the New Deal and the mechanization of agriculture and the white terror, blacks moved into Buffalo City. And in this process of whites moving out and blacks moving in, the social geography of Erie County changed. Fast forward to the present, and we see Babcock's principle in action. If you look at the highest value municipalities in Erie County, you find them white, socially exclusive, with only a handful of black people living in them. And if you look at the lowest value municipality in terms of housing, you find the highest concentration of blacks and the greatest levels of class inclusivity. And so if we compare Clarence with Buffalo City, we see almost no whites, blacks in Clarence, less than 2%, while we see in Buffalo over 37% African Americans. Clarence has the highest medium value housing in all of Erie County, and Buffalo has the lowest medium value housing in the county. But inside the city, we also see Babcock's principle at work. African Americans are situated on the lowest valued land in terms of home ownership, while whites are concentrated in the highest valued land. Again, the whiter and more exclusive a place, the higher the value, the blacker and more inclusive a place, the lower the value. Now, residential segregation is about a lot more than just the separation of blacks and whites. In this segregated environment, a high wall of rent traps African Americans on the east side. They're stuck in place. And that doesn't mean that people don't move or don't move around Buffalo. But what it does move is that when these folks leave, the neighborhoods into which they move look a whole lot like the neighborhoods that they left. That's what I mean by the high wall of rent. Now, because they are contained and have limited choices, they become the victims of predatory forms of investment and predatory forms of development. Let's get one thing perfectly clear. The idea of disinvestment on Buffalo's east side is a lie, a myth. There's no disinvestment going on over there. There is predatory forms of investment. And predatory forms of investment are to suck wealth, suck resources, suck dollars out of community like a big vacuum cleaner. And that's what we have. And everybody's in the game, including the state of New York, that pours these lottery machines all over the Buffalo's east side, sucking some $32 million a year out of that community. And people say, why? And people who buy the lotteries tell you, this is my only chance. But they say, you got 1 in a million chances. And they smile. And without that lottery ticket, I got no chances. I'll take my 1 in a million. These conditions have generated 5 root problems. A root problem is a problem that grows and produces other kinds of problems and issues. So I want to spend a little bit of time moving through each of these root problems. Substandard housing, which is characterized by rent gouging and unhealthy homes. I don't guess I really need my notes. I think I carry them around as a safety net, like a little teddy bear. And I never really look at them, so they're all in the way, so I'm gonna just put my notes aside. By rent gouging, we're talking about charging some 35% or more of income for substandard, unhealthy homes. 2 researchers, Matthew Desmond and Nathan Wilmer, did a pioneering study on Milwaukee, and they found that the owners of these low-income housing were making hyper profits by charging high rents and doing literally no maintenance on the property. And the gap between the no maintenance and the rent generated huge super profits. We got that going on all over Buffalo, where people are paying 40, 50, 60% of their income on rent. And in some neighborhoods, like the community just south of Martin Luther King Park, in the Broadway Fillmore area, the median household income in that neighborhood is $13,000 a year for renters. The median gross rent in that community is $820, slightly above the citywide median. You do the math. That's a little over $9,000 a year. And if you're paying $9,000 a year and you're making $13,000, you're paying almost 77% of your income on housing. You ain't got no money for nothing else. Clothing, medicine. Don't even think about entertainment. Always living on the economic edge. And this high rent creates all kinds of neighborhood levels of instability. Evictions are right at the core. Buffalo, New York has the highest rate of evictions in all of New York State. Understand what I'm saying? And most of these people being evicted are women with children. And when you get evicted, you're now trapped in the worst housing within the community, because you'll never be able to get a good apartment if you could afford it, if you got an eviction notice. Then you have people moving just to keep from being evicted. Housing conditions go poor housing conditions go hand in hand with rent gouging. And in this kind of situation and circumstance, you can look and visually see the poor quality of housing all across the east side. And in some neighborhoods, the levels of maintenance are so poor that nearly 90% of the houses are showing severe signs of distress and the lack of maintenance. Now, Luann Brown of the Perinatal Network shared some slides with me to give me a better idea of some of the kind of challenges that her clients face on the housing front. Now, this mother was concerned about this apartment because it had lead in it. And she said in that refrigerator, the roaches would get in there. And so she had to constantly buy more food. She was worried because her children were always sick. And the house was infested with rats. And these things run through the house and through the walls at night. Sleep deprivation was the issue. Fortunately, this woman was able to get out of that house thanks to Luann. But many other black women and their children can't. They're stuck in these places. Unkept sidewalks and curbs is a part of another problem of disintegrating infrastructure. Now, in Buffalo's East Side, that's a walking community where a significant number of people walk. They don't own cars. And so, navigating these sidewalks and strollers or mobility devices is literally impossible. Dangerous for elders and seniors to walk on because of the ease of tripping and falling. So as a consequence, you see a lot of people just walking in the street. Winter comes, everybody's walking in the street because there ain't nobody cleaning those sidewalks. And the situation is very bad. Vacant lots is another part of the problem of disintegrating infrastructure. One of the tragedies of the vacant lots, because you hear Mayor Brown always talking about, well, we had to tear down the houses because abandoned houses were a problem. We tore down more houses than anybody. Yeah, but you didn't put anything in their place. You solved one problem by creating another equally dangerous problem. You didn't do anything. All kinds of creatures are living in these vacant lots. Possums, skunks, rats. And when it gets cold outside, they try to find a safe haven in the homes of people. Not to mention, I got to tell you, it's scary walking on a street full of vacant lots at night, knowing somebody can just grab you and nobody would even know you had disappeared. The lack of a green infrastructure is a huge issue. And this is one of my favorite slides because you can visually see the difference in the tree coverage between the west side and the east side. And the problem with this is that you have thousands of cars moving through the east side on a daily basis, spewing noise and pollution into the air, creating all kinds of health issues for the people who live in that community. Third, a huge issue is that black folks do not own or control the land on which their community is being built. What that means is that politicians, land speculators, realtors, developers are the ones who make all of the choices and decisions about how they're going to develop somebody else's community. Half the people making those decisions, the only way they can even get to the east side is with a GIS system. Yet, they're the ones that drive and control the development in that community. And whenever they think development, they are thinking about transactions, not community building. We call that a conflict of interest. And in these communities, even the abandoned houses they control, they decide to tear them down or to fix them up. It's always their choice, and rarely, if ever, do they make those choices and decisions in consultation with the people who live in the neighborhoods and the communities. And structural joblessness is a huge issue. Now, I call it structural joblessness because another lie we have been told is that the reason African Americans have all these low-income jobs is because they lack the education. That's a half-truth. When you look at Buffalo's economy, what you find is that 70% of the jobs, 70% of the jobs require only a high school degree and some college. Yet, African Americans who are on par with whites in terms of high school graduation rates and have a higher percentage of them have some college and no degree, because when white folks go to college, they finish. So there's a larger number of them with degrees. But in terms of that population, it's different. Yet, a staggering 44% of the black job labor force have only part-time jobs. Now understand, to be in the labor force, you must either be working or looking for a job. So we divided these jobs in Erie County into two types: those for the college-educated elite and what we call the white working class jobs. And what we discovered is that white workers had created a literal monopoly on the high-wage, high-skill working class jobs, while blacks were concentrated in the low-skill, low-paid sectors of the economy. Structural joblessness. The last issue is what I call symbolic projects. City government and the state government, rather than attacking the root problems facing black people, are constantly coming up with symbolic projects. Projects designed to create hope and possibilities. But because these projects will not bring about structural change, they are full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Right now, the city of Buffalo is investing some $98 million in Buffalo Central Terminal. And that's some additional money other than the $61 million. The state is throwing in additional dollars. In Broadway, Fillmore, the second poorest neighborhood in all of the city. And they want us to believe that developing the terminal is somehow going to transform the dilapidated and substandard housing. Somehow we're going to change the vacant lots. Somehow going to create a renaissance for the people who live there. Symbolic projects full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. But what they have done, understand, these sneaky politicians and their private sector partners have figured out a way to turn the Black East Side into a big jobs program for white people. Right now, as we talk, over $2 billion in projects are being planned or implemented on Buffalo's East Side. And I'm not even talking about the governor's billion-dollar project to cover sections of the Kensington Expressway. But guess what? Most of those contracts are going to go to white business owners. And most of the people doing the work are going to be white workers. And those billions of dollars are going to pass through the black community like water through a sieve en route to the suburban municipalities. As I speak out there, they're popping champagne and smoking cigars because they know a big payday is coming. The health issue is not one of our root problems, but it really is. Because all of these issues impact African American and their health. The black premature death rate is 50% greater than whites. Understand that. When I talk about premature death, I'm talking about a social tragedy. And I'm not talking about somebody just dying before their time. I'm talking about that great leader who could have changed the world had she not died at 14. I'm talking about that artist who had done paintings that would have inspired and giving hope to thousands, millions, had he not died at birth. And then I'm thinking about other issues. When we look at Black Buffalo and we compare them to other blacks across the nation, Black Buffalo has one of the lowest life expectancies rates among African Americans in the United States. If you're black and you're in Buffalo, you can improve your chances of living longer just by moving to some other city. And our politicians are drinking wine, eating steaks, with smiling faces, talking about Buffalo rising. So how do we make black progress in Black Buffalo? We must attack root problems. We have a saying on Buffalo's east side, when the problems go big, the politician's solution goes small. So we've got to match big problems with big solutions. We must attack the root problems. We have to establish a publicly funded East Side Community Land Trust that will allow the residents in those communities to take control over the land. That land is a common. It's a common resource that benefits the entire community, and a bunch of speculators and developers should not have the power to control how that land is used. And it needs to be publicly funded so that we can acquire the type of staff that we need to make that kind of system operate and work. And we got to develop a green infrastructure with a tree canopy. The ability to deal with storm water. Buffalo has East Side has a huge problem with basement flooding and the like. We didn't talk about food apartheid, but it's an issue. And we've got to develop a solution to that issue that's based upon much more than just having one or two corporate stores located in that community. Most significant, we have to develop a robust on-the-job training program. And by that I mean to say, if billions of dollars are being spent on Buffalo's East Side, let's train the people on the East Side to do the work. To do the work. And let's eliminate this issue of unnecessary credentialing. I mean, why do I have to take a test to get in a job training program like they do at Northern? Why you have to take a test? Well, you don't know how to read. Oh, okay. Well, teach me what I need to know about reading as I work. You can do that. You don't know math. Well, teach me the math I need to know while I'm learning the job. I don't need to be a mathematician. I just need to know how to do this type of math. Show me while I work. That's creativity. Unnecessary credentialing is pretending you have to have an associate degree. That you telling me I got a high school diploma in some college, but I didn't get the associate, so I can't get the job. Come on, people. Come on. And so we're looking into this issue of unnecessary credentialing. Polling Cars has allocated some $200,000 for us to do a study of this issue that I've been talking about tonight so that we can get to the bottom of that. My point is that we can do significantly better in creating jobs and opportunities for people who live on the East Side. We need to create these opportunities so that people can participate in rebuilding their own communities while they rebuild their lives. And when we look at all of these things together, I'm kind of like filled with hope and optimism because of all of the research and work and study that I've done, of all of the people that I've talked with. I hear the same message coming back over and over and over again. And that is that we are now beginning to imagine another very different Buffalo, and that we believe that another Buffalo is possible. Peace and power.
That was a wonderful presentation from Dr. Taylor.
Go up to the mic. Go up to the mic. Oh.
That was a wonderful presentation from Dr. Taylor. Appreciate it so much. What we're now going to do is have the panelists give their own reflection as to Dr. Taylor's presentation in their own lives. And we'll start with Deacon Jerome, then we'll go to Natalia, then Letitia, and then Hugh. So, Jerome?
Thank you. So I'm just going to put this down because there's no way to follow in 2 minutes what Dr. Taylor just said. But what I can say is what Dr. Taylor said, I have lived. I live every day in the community on the east side that I reside in. Not only do I live that way every day, my neighbors, friends, and family live the same way. He gave you just now the empirical evidence to substantiate what I've known all my life, that there's a serious problem with racism in this country. And that until we're ready to have an honest and open discourse, as we're attempting to do now, nothing will change. I personally have never known a problem to exist that solved itself. Now you may have, and if you did, please see me afterward because I got a few that need that recipe. So, what we need now is a collaborative effort to change the status quo. The status quo has got to go. It serves us nothing. And it makes all our lives worse for its presence. Dr. Taylor talked about just some of the issues that impact my community. They are so wide and far-reaching that we could just spend all the time, and I'm sure he could show you as many reports to substantiate it. But the question is, we know what happened yesterday and why, and we know what we want our tomorrow to look like. What are we willing to do today? That is the essential question. What are you and I willing to do today about what we know from facts and narrative is what's going on in Buffalo? To be the 6th most segregated city in the country is a black eye, and it totally debunks the story that this is a city of good neighbors. Because good neighbors don't segregate themselves to that degree. So are we going to recapture what we say is a city of good neighbors? Or are we going to do like the developers and everybody else, paint this rosy picture for the world while we live in pain, disharmony, and poverty? Many of you raised your hands when I spoke here at a sermon before and said you were ready and willing to make that step. I want to give you one anecdote. Dr. Taylor told you what's going on, which means we don't need no more problems. We don't need no more allies. We need co-conspirators who got stake in the game like we got it. So let me give you a quick anecdote. In South Carolina, a black woman climbed up a flagpole to remove a Confederate flag that was banned by law but remained there. A police officer, a white police officer, saw her and came over and demanded that she get down. She said, I am removing an illegal object. Now, if it was a gun and she picked it up and gave it to me, he'd be happy. But because it's a Confederate flag and she's a black woman, she ain't supposed to do that. He said, I am warning you one time and one time only. If you do not come down, he pulled out his taser. Now, I ain't no scientist, but I know if you put a taser on a pole that's metal, she's going to fall. Be shocked and fall. At that moment, a white gentleman said, wait, what are you doing? She's doing nothing wrong. Why are you bothering her? He said, this is none of your business. Ma'am, I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, put the taser on the pole, and before he could pull the trigger, the white man put his hand on the pole. And he said, I guess you're going to be tasing both of us today. And what happened? He tased neither one of them. That's what we need. We need you to put your hand on the pole with us as we fight for freedom, justice, and equality in the new Buffalo. Thank you.
I really don't want to follow him or him, but I kind of just want to give him, you want my 2 minutes? Nah. No, but sincerely, I think that sometimes my frustration with this work is that we stay in the abstract and we talk about, oh yeah, we have a problem and it's really segregated and peace and love and we're going to choose love and that's all we need, and that's not enough, right? These problems are systemic. And it's not just a matter of between you and me interpersonal racism. And I think that sometimes that's what racism is boiled down to. And, you know, last year I became a racial equity impact analysis trainer. And what really stood out to me is that there are 4 levels of racism. So you have the internalized racism, which is all of the different messages and codes and biases that are projected onto through society. And then you have interpersonal racism. So that is the direct, explicit racism that happens between individuals. And then from there, you get to institutional racism. That's the racism that's baked into our institutions. Look at healthcare, look at education, look at our policies. And then you get to systemic racism. So that is when all of that internalization, all of the interpersonal dynamics, the systems come together, or the institutions come together to create the racist system that we navigate every single day. And I think a quote that I wrote, and I don't know where I took this from, so if anybody knows where I took this from, let me know. But it's, the personal is political and the political is personal. And so it's so easy to point to somebody and say, oh, that's them, that's their individual problem. They made those decisions, that's why they're in the position that they're in. But as Dr. Taylor just pointed out, all of this is intentional. The system is not broken. I think we need to be very clear about that. It's so easy to say, oh, the system's broken, we have to fix it. The system was designed to be exactly the way that it's functioning right now. It was intended to be like this, and we need to dismantle it. And so until we get intentional and say, what are the problems here? It's not at an individual level. Don't get me wrong, some people make some questionable decisions. I've met some. But how have the systems that we're navigating influenced them to make the decisions that they make? What pushes someone to the point that they have to steal a meal for the night? You know, what makes somebody not be able to go to the doctor and make sure that they're caught up on preventative care? They don't even have health insurance. They don't have transportation to get to the doctor. How are they going to do that? And so it's just so important that instead of just saying, you know, I'm not racist, and instead of just living in that abstract, how can we get intentional and realize what our individual roles are in this broader problem? Because again, just as a consequence of being human, we all have a role in the systems that we're navigating. So how can we collaborate and work together in a way that goes beyond the symbolic? I mean, beyond the choose love shirts and beyond saying buckle love, and face what we have going on here, because nothing's going to change until we get intentional about changing it. And a quote from James Baldwin that I think I probably said in the first session, so forgive me, is that not everything that's faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So all of these things are happening around us, regardless of if we want to talk about it or not, regardless of if we want to face it head on or not. But we need to work together and we need to collaborate. And I think that just seeing this room right now gives me hope that we can do that. And I'm feeling pretty optimistic about the future. So thank you.
Good evening. And I am supposed to come behind all of them. I think tonight, Dr. Taylor really solidified what we have going on here. I get a little nervous, so excuse me. I think I do this almost every time I speak, or for these last two sessions, but I'm just gonna speak from the heart. I have been in Buffalo all my life, and the racism and the privilege and power is real. And in order for us to do something about it and make change, I think we have to look at restructuring the policies and the government. That's where everything is trickling down from. And like Natalia said, the system is not broken. It was designed to be like this. We need to redesign. So it's gonna start there. I'm going to actually pose a question to Dr. Taylor. What do you think we can do? Like, what would be the next steps to actually work on the racism? Thank you.
That's a great question. I mean, I think we're at a very special moment in Buffalo. Over the past 5 or more years, we've developed a number of different organizations and groups on the west side and the east side that I think understand that we have to do things very, very differently if we want to transform and change the city. And that also understand that we just have to take over City Hall. It doesn't work, it won't work, and it won't work. So I'm interested in replacing that crew of politicians with a new crew, but this crew are ones that are linked and tied to us. So I think what's next on the agenda is the building of a summit where the heads of all of the key progressive organizations and groups come together to begin to figure out how we can work more closely together. Because if you look at across our community at the block clubs and a number of groups that we've built, like the African American Health Disparities Task Force, and I'm a part of the Buffalo Health Equity Center, Push Buffalo, Partnership for Public Good, and there are many others. But we're working in our own neighborhoods and communities and in our own sectors. And now the time has come for us to organize the summit where we bring the heads of these groups together. And that we organize around the basic theme. We have a right to the city. We have a right to the city. The city does not belong to the politicians, the developers, the real estate industries. The city belongs to the people. Amen. So we have a right to be in a position to make the choices and the decisions that will make us a better place. Now, some people say, well, what about economics? Well, we run the numbers. I'm working with the team now. And we're looking at the issue. Take substandard housing. When we have people paying 30-40% of their income on housing, when you start to look at who owns those houses, the majority of them are owned by people who don't even live in the city of Buffalo. Many of them don't even live in the county. So what you have is a significant source of revenue generated in the city of Buffalo that leaves without a dollar being spent here. Imagine if we captured those dollars. So this is what I'm talking about, doing things in a very, very different way. And I think we can build a great city, but it will be us to us, not the politicians downtown.
Good.
So, after listening to Dr. Taylor, I want desperately to follow his lead. Here are my notes. About 62 years ago, right over there, by that white font, I was baptized. And I say that not to make Matt happy, although I hope it does. I say that because I've been a member of this church for my entire life, 62 years. And members of this church, if truth be told, are the kind of people who would have set up, facilitated, and supported the systems that got us where we are today. Why am I involved in this meeting tonight? Why am I involved in this process? It's very easy to listen to someone like Dr. Taylor relate the history of Buffalo or of the United States and to feel guilty or wrong, or that it's my fault, or that it's my ancestors' fault. But I don't really think that's the purpose of this. I don't think the purpose of this process is to ascribe blame. Rather, I think the purpose is to figure out how to fix these problems, educated with how they arose, but looking forward to fix the problems. And so, for those of you like me who in life have participated in what has been called white privilege or structural racism, whether intentionally or not, don't take the blame, don't accept the blame, don't get lost in the blame, don't try to avoid the blame. Rather, let's move forward and try to fix the system as best we can. And since I love stories, and since I learn better in stories than in data, I have a poll story, Jerome. This is my poll story. I just heard it today, and like any good joke, if you don't tell it right away, you lose it. So I heard this story today, and it's going to become one of my stories. In the office of the famous author Alex Haley, famous American author Alex Haley, I guess probably best known for Roots, was a picture. And in the picture was a fence pole. And on the fence pole was a turtle. And visitors to Alex Haley's office would ask him, "What is that?" And he would say first, "Oh, whenever I get too full of myself, I think of the turtle on the fence post." And they would follow up and say, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he would say, "Well, when I look at the turtle on the fence post, I know he didn't get there alone. I know he had help." We are here to get the turtle on the fence post, to help get the turtle on the fence post. No one can do it alone. I think that's part of what Jerome is talking about. We can't do this alone as individuals. We have to do this together. Everyone needs help, and that's why we're here. So, you get the poll story and the baptism story instead of my notes, but thank you.
Now we're going to have a question and answer period, or if you want to make comments, and Reverend Matt will facilitate that. And anyone who has a comment or question can come right here to the center. And remember, try to leave your comments or questions 2 minutes so we can get a fuller participation. Come on up.
So, indeed, the purpose of questions, the purpose of questions right now is specifically for clarification from Dr. Taylor about anything he said. We're going to get to more broad discussion as we go, but for the moment, if you could add, if you have a question about part of the history or his thoughts about the next step forward in concrete terms, let's stick to that kind of thing. And
that's exactly what I want.
Go nuts.
I've been an advocate my whole life, and it's really strange when you hear someone and you get all these ideas. I think everybody's right in that we're at a moment now. Everybody knows what happened with the top shooting, okay? And I think if we all got together and found out all these millions of dollars that are advocated, and if we said, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. What we want is for our people to do the work. We want a plan. Everything that you said, if we could, and I know it's Pollyanna, and in my advocacy for mental health mostly, there was a guy that is deceased, and he said, in government, change is glacial. It takes way too long. Of course, that's changed now because the glaciers are melting, and that's not as powerful as it used to be. But I think now's the time. You gave us so many ideas. I mean, don't you think we have some clout here? If everyone knows about it and all this money's coming, can't we somehow rally and say we want to know who's going to do it and we want to be part of it? I just
I mean, I think that's a huge question. With some of the preliminary research that we've been doing on this $2.x billion being spent, there's literally no information about how many jobs are going to be produced, who's going to get the jobs, and a lot of those other types of issues and questions. And so, yeah, I think the more we raise those issues and questions, the more we get push City Hall in a way to do something that's different. The group Build Promise has joined together with a number of ministries at St. Luke, and they're actually going to implement one of the strategies that we have suggested. They're building a homeless shelter with about $5 million, and they have promised, one, to do extensive work with the community to make sure that they're building what they want, and secondly, they're going to recruit and train workers from the community in order to do that work, so that a significant amount of the money that is spent is going in that direction. So that's the thing that we have to begin to fight for. City Hall moves as slow as a glacier, and that's why when we start thinking of the next mayoral race and the next council member races, we're going to get some people who are fast like a turtle. And I'm saying fast like a turtle, if you remember the story, the turtle beat the hare. And I don't know if this is true, but urban legend said that turtle won 3 out of 4 races.
Do the owners of vacant lots have a responsibility to maintain them? And I've seen a lot of lots that kids can't play on because there's so much broken glass and paper and junk and weeds and so on.
The greatest owner of vacant lots is the city of Buffalo. They own over 7,000 vacant lots on Buffalo's east side. And what they have done is, no, they don't maintain most of those lots, although legally they're supposed to, but they're the ones who create the laws and the ones who enforce the laws, so they don't do that. But most significant, they have commodified the vacant lots. And by commodifying the vacant lots, now they're interested in selling those lots for profit, not for community development. And when you sell the lots for profits, you drive up the cost of whatever kind of product that you're going to produce on them. Let me give you a specific example. In Buffalo's fruit belt, St. John, which had a community-oriented project in place, had to buy 3 of these unkept vacant lots, appraised at around $16,000, and the city of Buffalo charged him $90,000 for those 3 vacant lots, $200,000 for those 3 vacant lots. Not far on Best Street, a developer that I know said the city charged them $100,000 again for a vacant lot. And if you just look at a number of places across the city, these lots are being sold at high prices. Developers, and I know some of them myself, are buying the vacant lots up, and then with the idea of selling them for a profit because of all of the attention that is being kept on Buffalo's east side. So now they don't upkeep them, but they're about trying to make profits out of them, and that's wrong. Which is why we need to fight to develop a publicly funded community land trust that can take those properties.
Well, does it make sense to try to get the city to fix up these lots? Like there's one at Sycamore and Goodyear, which has just got junk all over it.
The state is not going to interfere with city policy.
They will not do it?
No.
Who makes that decision to charge what
They consider it market-driven. So if by market-driven, if they think a lot will generate a given profit, they'll put it up for sale at that level. So in certain areas where they know land is expensive, like in and around the medical school, some of those lots will sell for $100,000, $150,000, and like. In other locations, they won't be as expensive. But it's all about the location of the lot and the profitability that they think the market will bear. So, for example, the mayor of Buffalo, in one of his more ridiculous strategies, on Adams Street, they've coupled up a number of lots. Now, they're giving away those lots to builders with the idea that they can develop a series of market rate houses that will trigger development. But even if it's successful, and it won't be, when I say it won't be, they tried the same thing on LaSalle. At that time, I was in another age, and I thought it would catalyze. So I was actually one that led that project. It didn't catalyze, didn't do anything. It's a nice little space. If you've been to that section by the train station, a great little neighborhood, but it didn't grow. Then they built one on Jefferson Avenue. That didn't grow. So that won't happen. But the greater danger is they're attempting to change the class and race structure of Buffalo. And I'm very concerned about that. For the first time in about 60 years, the black population in Buffalo has dropped below 90,000. For the first time. And we could see that trend line coming. We could see that trend line coming. And if you don't think it's possible, in 1970, Washington, D.C. was 70% black. Today it's 43%. St. Louis, the same way. Atlanta is headed in that same direction. So we know that. So there's this vacant lot issue is a serious kind of issue, and we have to mount a real massive effort if we're able to drive development in that community. Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to first answer Ms. Rice's question. I believe it's W.E.B. Du Bois who you quoted. And for people who don't know, he's the first African American to graduate from Harvard, and he was one of the directors of research, et cetera, at the NAACP. Now, my point is, you've mentioned that we've had problems with politicians. How do we organize groups of people who may not live in the communities you speak of to go to local politicians to emphasize that we are holding you accountable to make this city better for all of the people who live here and not just for the wealthiest of the people? And I want to mention meritorious manumission. That is a term that means that when people come into power, they are then blindsided because they have access to power and wealth, and they forget about us. Back in slavery times, if you were a slave and you helped the master, you got a benefit. If you reported that someone ran away, you got a benefit. This is the same thing with our politicians. Meritorious manumission is a problem, and we vote for our politicians, but we need to hold them accountable. How do we organize?
There are two issues. Issue one, most of the current political group, you waste your time trying to hold that crew accountable. You have to put a new group of politicians that share your values and your beliefs in power. The second hard reality is that we have to understand the way they are attempting to build Buffalo, that won't work for black people. American capitalism and the market operating under a neoliberal model can't solve those issues. And by that I mean to say, you're not going to transform Buffalo's east side with a home ownership strategy. It won't work. It has never worked. And what make people think it's going to work now? But there are other forms of ownership that you can go after. The cooperative forms of ownership. A land trust gives a whole community ownership. So with a city with no imagination and always trying to figure out how to get a dollar, they won't do that. That Byron Brown and that crew are tied to a system, a market-based system that runs counter to the interests of black people. They can't, even if they wanted to change, and they don't want to. So rather than spend our time and energy talking about how we're going to get the politicians to be accountable, we should be thinking of our own electoral strategy, grooming politicians who flow from our way of thinking and running them. I mean, we have to remember we almost got City Hall with India Walton. So it is possible to build a progressive political movement with politicians that belong to the people rather than politicians that belong to the development community. Because at the end of the day, they'll make great speeches. I mean, Byron Brown has made speeches that have brought tears to my eyes. But he wasn't going to implement none of that stuff. And I'm saying that because I worked closely with those people for over 20 years. I know them. And I know what they won't do.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. This sounds great, and I'm wondering where in our country, or perhaps Canada, the cooperative or land trust model has been used in an urban situation. Are there people we can look
at?
I'm sorry, Ms. The land trust, using a land trust in an urban situation or some kind of cooperative ownership, where has it been used that we can look and build on?
There are lots of models all over the country of land trust, and there's a lot that's been written about it. And based on a lot of the things that we already know about land trust, one of the things that we've learned is that they need to be publicly funded, because most land trusts are privately funded and people are constantly raising money and resources. But yeah, the other thing I always remind people when we start talking about cooperatives, cooperative development, we have to, two things we have to understand, because we don't understand ourselves. Our greatest accomplishment on the cooperative front are the churches. Churches, a number of co-ops.
You couldn't have brought that up at a better time.
I mean, that's all they are. They're co-ops. Nothing but a co-op. People bringing their collective resources together to do something. Black community, they build co-ops. That's all a church is. There are many other institutions, including churches, go into social enterprises. I'm chairman of the board of the King Urban Life Center, and I tried to explain to the folks once, we own a school that we rent out. And then we take the resources that we get from the school and we invest them in social programming. We rent out the church and we take the money and that we don't divvy it out to stockholders. That's social enterprises. A lot of churches do that. So if we know who we are, why can't we expand the model and go some other places? That's all I'm saying.
So we're going to shift gears here for a moment. There will be, yes, thanks to Dr. Taylor for his comments. And I know a few more of you have questions, but I think the trend of the questions is, what steps do we take? And we're going to come back to that. But for a moment, I want to introduce somebody who can suggest some concrete steps, because she oversees a wonderful program here in Buffalo called Voice Buffalo. When I moved here 7 years ago, Denise, this is pretty funny. Two things happened. One, Bruce McKay and I had breakfast, and he just invited me to have breakfast with him. I didn't know him or anything, and he said, you got to get involved in Voice Buffalo. And the other thing that happened was that somebody with some influence over me, that is some authority over me as a minister in the Episcopal Church, said, oh, you better be careful about those people at Voice Buffalo. And I thought, oh, okay, so this is good.
Yeah.
Because maybe something happens with these folks. So Denise Walden Glenn is the executive director of Voice Buffalo these days. Jerome Wright, whom you have heard from already, is also deeply involved in the leadership there. And so it is a great privilege to ask Denise and somebody she brought with her to come share some concrete thoughts about next steps.
Peace and blessings to you all on this evening. Peace and blessings to y'all. These questions got me fired up. Let me just go ahead and say that up front. And I want to thank Father Matt for opening his doors, and thank Bruce and Deacon Drum and everybody up here and everybody that's worked hard to put this together. I am extremely excited to be here this evening, and I had prepared all these words, and then I heard these questions, and it shifted things for me. And that person with influence over you, absolutely right. We are known as the home of good trouble. So I'm hoping there are some people out here this evening that's ready to join us and get into some righteous, good trouble.
There we go.
Are y'all ready? I am hoping so. I also want to the question about models for land trust, just so you know, Buffalo has a land trust in the Fruit Belt. There are organizers that have worked, a lot of them my friends and colleagues, including myself, to help make that happen, right? So we have a land trust right here. So it's not like we have to search far and wide to find a model, because we have one right here at home. And that tends to be the issue sometimes, right? We go looking for things when the truth is, a lot of times we already have the solutions. We need to learn to tap into them, right? And so during Dr. Taylor's presentation, I heard a few things, right? I heard him talk about how the needle in the Black community of Buffalo has not shifted, not in a direction that will build equity, not in a direction that will allow people to thrive. And to some degree, it's actually moved in the opposite direction in our community. But I'm here to tell y'all, hope is not lost. I heard my sister come up here and ask, how do we organize? Where do we organize? Hi sis, this is where we organize. We willing to do this work. We're about this work every day, all day. All day. I started at Voice Buffalo as a community organizer, and I have built my way up to executive servant leader, and I am proud to serve the community of Buffalo, specifically the east side of Buffalo, where we are constantly getting in good trouble. I have Miss Aliyah Williams here with me. She is the youngest organizer on our team, but she is a powerhouse, I promise you all, and we're gonna share with you some ways to enter in some good trouble with us. I also want to say I agree with Dr. Taylor that our city lacks the leadership that speaks to the people and the heart and the wants and the desires of the people. But I also will say I am a strong person who believes in accountability. So as long as those folks, and Voice Buffalo is a 501c3 nonpartisan organization, we do not endorse parties or candidates. Just want to put that out there. But as long as those people are in office, we will do the work, and we will organize, and we will build the people power that will continue to hold them accountable. And trust me, when enough of their constituents show up, it changes some things. What needs to happen though is we need to start showing up. We need to become proactive, right, in the things that impact us. But we stay distracted by the systemic oppression and the poverty, so much so that we are so tired that we are just trying to exist. And so how do we start to address the things that will speak to the people's basic needs so that they can move to a place of more than surviving, so that they can show up in their full power for themselves? And that's the work of Voice Buffalo. That is what we do, right? We all know, or I'm hoping that we all know, that poverty is certainly a policy choice. It is a policy choice that happens so that some people benefit while others of us consistently get extracted from and worn down. But again, if enough of us stand, if enough of us start to learn to navigate so that we are now writing the policy and the legislation and demanding it, it changes things. And it can be done. I am not on the panel, but there are some of you out in this audience that know me, and a bunch of them on this panel that know me. I was a young single mama from the hood, just trying to feed my babies every day, to now I no longer live in poverty. My kids' health outcomes will change because I own my own home, and I understand, and I get out here and I show them what it looks like for them to stand up against the oppression and fight and walk in their power and their true identity. And it is not the one that the system tells them that they are, right? And so what I would like to do right now is I'm gonna turn it over for a few minutes to Aliyah to give you all some practical ways, some things that you can get involved in right now. We're gonna offer you some true invitations into this liberation work to be partners and co-conspirators with us in the change work so that we are all thriving, okay? And then I'm gonna come back and share a divine call with you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Aliyah Williams, and I'm an organizer for Voice Buffalo. I work specifically with populations between the ages of 13 through 30. I am born and raised in Buffalo, New York. Very, very proud to say that. But I'm going to keep it short and quick and give you all some very, very important calls to action. I heard the conversation around how do we hold our elected officials accountable. I believe there are multiple ways to do that, but I believe one of the first steps, if not the first steps, is showing up at the polls. Our elected officials are counting on us to not show up at the polls. They are counting on formerly incarcerated people to not show up at the polls. They are counting on our young people to not show up at the polls. They are counting on Black and brown people to not show up at the polls. They are counting on mature populations to not show up at the polls. So the first step in holding them accountable is to show up and say, we here, and we're gonna make some noise. So with that being said, Voice Buffalo is doing a host of get out the vote efforts, one including phone banking. We are asking folks to be willing to be phone banking captains, specifically to be captains of their congregation. And what this would look like is we would train you on what phone banking is, why it's important, and we would provide the materials, any technology that you need, and then you would offer up a phone banking session to your congregation. That would look like bringing a few people in and taking a number of phone calls to remind people that we have an election this November. I will be around if anyone is interested in doing that. We are also having a Souls to the Polls event on November 5th. We are interested in canvassers between now and then to come out and canvass neighborhoods, specifically on the East Side, if you all are familiar with the East Side, again, to remind people to vote. And answer any questions they might have. Oftentimes, people don't even know what their polling place is, so it's important to provide that information. I will also be passing out flyers for our Souls to the Polls event as well. And my last two calls of action, one of the more fun calls to action, Voice Buffalo is hosting a trunk or treat event on October 27th, Thursday, at the Tri-Main building from 6 to 9. Our trunk or treat event is just going to include us passing out candy. Some of the candy is gluten-free as well as vegan. Others is full of good old gluten and dairy. Most of it is full of good old gluten and dairy. So I would love to see you all come, and even if you can't show up, I challenge you all to ask someone else who may be able to show up. And my last call to action, I am offering an invitation to you all to become members of Voice Buffalo. Membership would allow you to have a say in the different campaigns that we hold. You would get first dibs on the events that we have, and you would be a part of our family, essentially. In order to be a member of Voice Buffalo, you can donate any amount that you can afford. I will be passing out sign-up sheets for that as well. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
And I just want to remind you all, when we do our GOTV work, again, we are nonpartisan, we are a C3, we are simply here to provide education for people so that people can make an informed decision about what aligns with their values and their belief system, right? And what Aaliyah didn't tell you all is she oversees the VIBE campaign. VIBE stands for Voice Influences Building Equity. Why is that important? Because there are people in our community who their voice has been silenced. Silenced. Although the things and the decisions that are made about them and impact them, and they are told they have no say. And so when we run our Get Out the Vote efforts, we want them to know that they absolutely have a say. And we invite them into those efforts with us. Young people as young as 13 are with us. Formerly incarcerated people who have felonies that disqualify them from being able to vote. My immigrant and refugee brother and sisters who have not yet gotten their citizenship and don't have the right to vote, they go with us. Why? Because it's important for us to hear from them. It's important for us to realize why our voice and our vote matters so much, and we need to use it with integrity and know that it is a responsibility, a divine responsibility, right? And so that being said, Aaliyah and I had the privilege today of speaking at Houghton College, a Religion 101 class. And it warmed my entire heart to hear from these students. And one of these things that we talked to them about was power. And we educated them that power in its purest form is simply your ability to act. The divine gives us the ability to act. And so I say when we know better, we should exercise our power and we should do better. And we have to question ourselves as to what that looks like. Dr. Taylor gave us some incredible possibilities of solutions that can happen in our community, especially considering the amount of funding that has come into this community. But as Voice Buffalo, we want to say to you, let's not allow these to be possibilities. Let's do the righteous, radical reimagining that needs to happen. Let's do the organizing that needs to happen. And let's make these things actual for our people. Because they are deserving, right? And so I heard the phrase, be intentional about change. So I'm hoping tonight that you all are here because you want to be intentional about change. And my sister was absolutely right. The personal is political and the political is personal. Do you know why? Because the political influences my life every day. And I take that very personally. Okay? And so I am of the Christian denomination. I want to share something with you. It's going to come from my faith tradition, but I'm hoping that it lands with each of you in a real way and that it resonates with you. I'm going to read from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 10. It says, "Today I appoint you to stand up against nations and kingdoms. Some of you must uproot, that's us. Tear down, that too is us. Destroy, that's definitely us. And overthrow, most certainly us. Others of you must build up and plant. And Voice is relying on you to be in this thing with us in a real way, so that not only are we doing the work that will uproot, tear down, destroy, and overthrow, but that at the same time, we are building and planting. And to Dr. Hiller's point, it is not enough to tell people to go into home ownership if we are not going to equip them to sustain the homes once they own them, and they're just going to lose them anyway. That is where we are losing the battles, right? This work is not sprint work. This work is marathon work. This work is generation changing work. And we need to be in this work together. In verse 17a, it says, get up and prepare for action. Who in here is ready for action? Is there anyone in here ready for action? I know Deacon Jerome is ready for action. He's always ready for action. 18a says, for I see today that I have made you strong. If you ask me, the problem in our community a lot of times is fear. Fear of what we don't know, fear of what we don't understand, fear of what we feel we are no longer in control of. But my God tells me that I was not created to walk in fear, that I was uniquely and wonderfully made, created with a purpose and an expected end. And we all have a divine and a righteous responsibility to make sure that every person that we are in beloved community with has what they need to walk in purpose, on purpose, for what God created them for. And so I'm hoping that you all will see Aliyah. I'm hoping that you all will join us in membership. And membership is not about paying dues to Voice. When we talk about membership, we talk about those who are going far with us and that are truly on this journey with us. I hope that we will see you at our Souls to the Polls, but don't just come to Souls to the Polls. Make sure that you are helping other people know how important their voice is, and that we want them to use it, and we want them to get out, and we want them to vote. I'm so excited to be with you all this evening. I'm looking forward to the rest of what's going to happen with this panel. And God bless you all. I hope to see you, hear from you, and I hope to walk in this journey with you. Peace and blessings to you.
So I'm just noting what time it is, and if you are as well, guess what? Nobody hold it against you if you have to leave before we're done, but we're not going to stop before we're done. There's a long way to go on this journey. And tonight, I want to give people a chance to respond, as we have done the last couple of weeks and so forth. But there's also been a whole lot of content that I think so many of us have already indicated was really valuable to hear. So I'm sorry that it's taking longer than we thought it would, but I'm not going to cut it short. So hang in there if you want to, and we'll keep moving through what we're trying to do. So I thought it would be nice to invite a couple of people from the sponsoring organizations just to name things that their churches are doing as places to connect. We won't belabor it, we'll just go quickly, and then we'll get into the brainstorming that all of us can participate in together. So first from St. Joseph's University Parish.
Good evening again. I'm a member of St. Joseph's University Parish, and at St. Joseph's we have an anti-racism committee that we meet. Can you hear me? There's an anti-racism committee at St. Joe's, and we meet monthly, and we're trying to change the culture at our church. We have sign-up sheets in the back for each of our groups if anybody's interested in joining us at St. Joe's to see what you can do to help us in our church. So given that, I guess I'll have Jerome. Deacon Jerome talk about what's happening at your church.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you can clap. I don't know why so stop. Martin and me. So I am a deacon. They keep saying that, so I'll tell you, I'm a deacon at Elam Christian Fellowship Church, where we held our first session. Elam, the title, if you don't know, means a place of refreshing. And I am offering you, if you want to get involved with any of the work that we do at Elam, we do have what has just been established and starting to thrive, a social justice ministry that works on the issues that we talked about today, but are not just limited to those. They're only limited by the things that you want to suggest that we get involved in. So I would ask that if you are interested, please sign up on the Elam sign-up list, and I promise you that I will personally get in touch with you to find out what your interest is and where you can fit in our ministry. I do want to say that my pastor did give me a scripture to read to you. I'm not going to read it because we're already behind time. But if you would tonight look at Galatians chapter 3, verses 26 to 29, I think you will capture the essence of what we are doing here today, what we hope to see, and why Elam is such a place of refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll speak for Trinity Church. Trinity has, from its earliest days, done more in the way of helping launch organizations that are good at what they're doing rather than try to do it from the church. One of the stories that we're proudest of at Trinity is it's very easy to drive by here. I don't know if you found yourself having a hard time locating this place when you came to visit tonight, because you went to Babeville just across the street, because they've got a steeple. We don't have a steeple because we built a settlement house instead. So since that time, and that was in the 1890s, since that time we've helped found Compass House and Home Space, and more recently Justice for Migrant Families, which is working to help immigrants with legal problems deal with those legal problems. It started out as something that happened here, but we fostered them as a 501c3, and they're now a standalone organization. So what are we doing? Not much, but we're pushing people out the door and getting involved in things that are going on. And that's part of this mix. It's about finding neighbors and collaborating. I do want to tell a quick story about another organization that is also housed here. Gardens Buffalo Niagara is the organization that organizes Garden Walk Buffalo and the East Side Garden Walk. Garden Walk Buffalo has been around for 25 years. The East Side Garden Walk's been around for 5 years. And it sounds sort of naive and sweet and low intensity and nice in that way. You know, nice is sometimes a swear word. And to say, oh, gardening, that's nice. Gardening on the East Side is an act of defiance. It's an act of saying, I'm rooted here. I'm growing nourishment here. I'm creating beauty where there are vacant lots, right? It is an act of being present and standing for the value of the community through neighborly sharing of things you care about and you find refreshing and beautiful. And something that I just heard happen the other day. So the East Side Garden Walk is under the same umbrella that organizes the garden walk that happens in Elmwood Village and around this part of the city. And some of the organizers of all of the various programs that are nurtured by Gardens Buffalo Niagara got together just a week ago. And one of the East Side gardeners went up to one of the West Side gardeners and said, hey, I hear you need a rain barrel. I've got an extra. Thank you very much, right? Right. So we believe in each other. We can do this. So let's see about thoughts that you have and more questions you might have about the concrete things. I will only say this much. There are some specific things about organizing and about system change that we need to get involved in. The dialogue that we've been doing the last couple of weeks, I hope, has been extremely helpful to a lot of people. We need to keep doing that because a lot of people have a lot to be scared about or think they have a lot to be scared about, and the dialogue helps move us past that. But if we don't, the problems are caused by policies and systems. And if we don't tackle them and dismantle them, we will miss the chance to make the change in which the dignity of everybody's life gets recognized and honored by how it is possible for us to live in community. So let's talk about policy change. Let's talk about finding out how to find the levers on the systems and move them. Please feel free to use that microphone and come up and share your thoughts and questions. If you can stand up and come up with the mic, that would be great. Otherwise, somebody can bring it to you.
I'd be interested in knowing how many people who've been attending these conversations and tonight, how many of them do not live in the city?
Show of hands, do not live in the city. Welcome to the city.
So a large number of people who have been participating and don't live in the city, but they love the city. They love the city.
Yeah.
And feel, I've heard this from friends who live in this outside the bounds of Buffalo City, that they know things are going on, but because they can't vote, they feel limited in terms of what action they can take. And so I want to encourage all the sisters and brothers who are here to go to Souls for the Polls. Do the body work. Do the incarnated work of getting your body out into the city in these actions, or call people. You can do that. You can get on the
phone banking.
Right. You can do that, and it's critical work to do. It's necessary to do. And I wanted to say to Hugh, you, in a very soft kind of way, landed something very powerful, at least in my hearing, about the role of the church, of the institutional church. It's ownership of land and property, not paying taxes, and that the system of racism has been built, that the church for decades, for a couple of centuries, have supported the racist dynamic of our country and is affecting what's happening in our city. We've got churches on every corner, and some of them hold great wealth, and they're paying their pastors pretty doggone good, I've got to tell you, because I was one of them. Somehow, how do we work within the dynamic of the church? How do we speak to, not out of guilt, not at all, but out of integrity and justice and the image of our Lord, who called us to accountability of our relationship with all aspects of our complex lives. So I want to personally thank you for that witness.
Can I just respond? Sorry. First of all, thank you. I'm glad that you got it. I just would, I suppose, say a couple things in response. One, and maybe particularly the Episcopal Church, has been at it since 1619 or so. if you read history, and Matt can tell you about the history of the Episcopal Church, but if you read history, in Virginia, for example, the same people who were writing our Constitution and our Bill of Rights were also really big in the Episcopal Church, and were writing its Constitution and its bylaws. So historically, the Church has played a role in setting up the society and the structures and the systems that have fostered the racist world in which we live. That's the first way. The second way, though, and maybe I didn't say it right, or I didn't explain it well, but the second way is that all of us church members, most of us church members, have a day job and have day networks and maybe have day connections, and our own structures and networks and systems of influence also created this society and sustain this society. So when I said that we all play a role, that's really what I meant.
Hi, my name is Janice Benson, and my question is for Henry, Mr. Henry. One of my relatives was murdered in a massacre, and then it was like a big issue about, you know, about rebuilding tops and all that good stuff. But my problem is with like trying to heal from that horrible thing. Is like every time I go down Jefferson, like I see that tops there. And I think it's a big slap in the face for them to reopen that tops. Because like it goes back to race, privilege, and all that good stuff. But like the baby died in Delaware, I mean, it wasn't even in Delaware Park. But just because that baby was a different color than I or any other rest of us. I mean, not all of us, but they redid the whole 33, like, voila. But what I don't get is how they not see all those empty fields over there on Jefferson Street and rebuild that tops, I mean, open up that tops again, because it's like, it's like a punch in the gut. Like, how do you go in tops and shop on top of where all these people were murdered? I just don't have no understanding to that. And it's hard for me to heal, you know, because the person in my family that passed away was such a beautiful person, and we come from really good stock, not Woodstock. You know, I come from, you know, a long line of wonderful people.
Say that name.
That lived through slavery, all that stuff, own their own businesses, their own farms, and all that good stuff. All of us are not bad people. It's bad in everybody, everything. But it's just, it takes all of us, like all of us here together. We need more. We need more voices and more people like us to try to get some answers.
The biggest issue with the reopening of tops is that we never got a plebiscite from the black community where we came together. Tops and the politicians never organized the town halls that would allow folks to make that choice and that decision. To me, that's the largest thing. I mean, I thought everything should have been driven through the community. And as far as I know, nothing was. As far as I know, there was not even a big meetings of the people even to talk about how the new tops would look. So that's part of the problem of building community on land that someone else owns. I mean, because you know, and I know there were a lot of issues with the tops before the shooting.
Yes.
That just dealt with the quality of that store, and they had ghettoized it. I mean, all of that got muted with the other issue. There were a lot of issues about why Tops was even located there, a stone's throw from one of the nation's worst toxic waste dumps. Y'all remember back when they had all of the congressional hearings about that dump, which is just a stone's throw away. The last thing I want to say, which is not on this subject, but on the issue that was raised earlier, we have to understand that the suburban communities that surround Buffalo, that's where our problem really is. That drives the issue. So this land value system that was created and is maintained by these suburban communities, because of all of the restrictions that they place on who and what can move there. Segregation in the city of Buffalo, understand it, is driven by the suburban municipalities. That drives segregation. That's why Buffalo, when they talk about that, understand about 82% of all whites in Erie County are in the suburban areas. Only 18% of white Erie County is in the city. So our mission is to radically transform Erie County. So our task is to work on both of those fronts, and I just wanted to make that 100% clear. So folks who live out in the suburban areas, y'all got some work in those municipalities where you live, as well as down here. So thank you for coming.
Matt.
If I could just get 90 seconds, because something important was raised, and I don't like leaving things unaddressed. So two things real quick. To my folks that are not in the city of Buffalo, but are in Erie County, to the point of Dr. Taylor, a lot of what is being pushed down and impacting us, it's not just on a city level, it's on a county level. And you all do have the ability to vote on a county level as well as stand with us on a city level. So I want that to be very, very explicitly clear. To my sister who stood up as the person who gave the death notifications on May 14th, let me tell you something. There were a lot of people in the community that were outraged about Tops reopening. But when I talk about fear, fear is a real thing. And people feared that if that Tops did not reopen, there would be no food access for our people. And so we allowed things to happen because folks moved in fear. This is why we must organize. This is why we must teach people that they have power and their voice and their vote holds power, so that that doesn't continue to happen. But to your point of the fact that you can't heal, I need you to go see Aliyah. There is support for you. There is help for you. There are people that will love on you, and you're absolutely right. There is a large number of folks in our community that can't even drive past that Tops. But you know what? We need to, so we can remember what happens when we don't exercise our power and when we don't fight for our community, because we should have never had one store to begin with. Okay? So please know that, and please see Aliyah. We definitely want to get you connected so that you can get to your own healing, because your hard work matters.
I want to make two things happen at the same time, or not quite at the same time. First of all, I want to make sure that those of you who are still here know that there are cider and goodies for you waiting, and I think some of this conversation can go on around a table. But there's one person waiting to make a comment. I want her to make her comment, and then let's see where we are. Maybe then we can adjourn and continue the conversation around food.
Thank you. My name is Beth. I've been a social justice activist and educator and anti-racist person for many years, working at the college level, teaching. Okay, I want to speak to the conversation around guilt, because as the Catholic in me, I really have no problem with a little bit of guilt being a motivator. But when I work with my students, I say, let's change that to responsibility. And I really believe that we as white people have white responsibility. And Claudia Rankine in her book Citizens talked about what it was like to be black in America. And she made a statement, and I can't remember because I'm a little too nervous right now, but you can walk away from an injury, but you can't walk away when you feel bad. As white Americans, we can walk away. We can be activists, we can be social justice workers, but we can go home and turn it off. But when we listen to our black and brown brothers and sisters, they can't turn it off. And so as white people, when we do nothing, we are committing the sin of omission. The sin of omission, which is a sin of doing nothing. So we cannot not do nothing. It is our responsibility. This is our problem that we created, that we need to address individually, collectively. So I have no problem with guilt, but I'd say let's change it to white responsibility. So I just thank you for giving me my soundbite.
Jerome, can I just say one thing briefly? No. I have white privilege, don't forget.
You do got white.
Who's got the thing? I got a funny example about me and Jerome at the stadium with white privilege. Perfect example.
Yes, tell
Briefly, a little light moment. Jerome invited me to a Buffalo Bills game. I said, of course. I'm in my apartment like a recluse for months in the winter. And he takes me up there, and I'm with Justin and another gentleman, I forget who that was. We get to the gate. I forgot my paper ticket. I left my phone in the car, which is a half a mile away now, and it's raining and snowing and everything. And I told the guy said, well, where's yours? I said, it's in the car. He says, well, he says, I say, I have to sit down. I said, I'm fainting, right? He says, well, sit over there. I said, no, I want to sit in that wheelchair over there. So I amble over to the wheelchair. Somebody comes up behind me and says, where are you going? I said, up to whatever it was upstairs, right? And I go up there, and then I meet people upstairs. Jerome says, if that was me and I told him I didn't have a ticket, he said, I'd be at the Erie County Holding Center if I tried to get in, right? Briefly, my name is Chuck Culhane, and my claim to fame is I did a lot of time in prison for bad behavior when I was young. I'm a member of the Western New York Peace Center, which has been around for 67 years, and there's a new leader with that, Deidre El Amin, who has invited for our annual dinner this year a woman named Leah something, who is a farmer and has a land-based consciousness that I think is going to be interesting this year as a speaker. If you can, just check it out with the Western New York Peace Center. It might be interesting, Dr. Taylor, the things that you're mentioning about Black Land Matters and things like that. I'm excited that the Peace Center is going in a new direction under new leadership too. For the first time in 67 years, a black woman is in the leadership of the Peace Center. They've been around a long time. Thank you.
So we were hoping that Buffalo's poet laureate Jillian Hainsworth could be here to give us, well, we got all these clergy around here, but a sort of non-clergy benediction. Well, she sent us one. She can't be here tonight, and a clergy person has it on her phone, so come on and do it.
She definitely wants you all to know that she really wanted to be here. She sends her love, light, and positivity to us in this space, and her most precious gift that God has given her has been strained. And so she is under doctor's orders to rest and heal it. So she asked me to share some words with you on this evening. And what she would like you to know is the Black community in Buffalo, as well as Black communities across the country, are in a state of emergency. The urgency has always been there, but what we saw happen in our own city on May 14th cemented the fact that our fight against white supremacy is life or death. She stands in solidarity with everyone who is here on this evening, and that will make a pledge to continue to use every gift that God has given them as she's using the gift that God has given her for the purpose of liberating our people. This is not a hobby, she says, that she does or something to care about just when life is easy. And she wants to know, are you willing to join her in this fight and in this pursuit of justice? She wants you to know it is crucial that you embed the work into everything that you do and everything that you create. She says, let's be honest, let's be consistent, and let's always put each other first. All power to all the people. Ashe and Amen.
Please linger in the red carpet area. There's plenty of cider and goodies and other wonderful people. So what better combination?
Yes. Give me a hug. Sorry, guys. I got